Well, we're in Psalm 35. We left off yesterday in verse 17 with David praying, Lord, how long wilt thou look on? Verse 17. David just lifting up to God his complaint, but also his assumptions that God knows, that God is sovereign and providential, that God knows the timeline, and basically willingly waiting and enduring through what God has called him to go through. So he continues in verse 17, Lord, how long wilt thou look on? Rescue my soul from their destructions. My darling, that word means only one, an only one, or a precious life, or an alone, single, solitary life. So David realizes that in God's providence and sovereignty, that he is unique. He is God's, and God cherishes and loves him as an individual, okay? A meaningful, valid, God-loved, God-created individual. And that's the idea there, okay? And he realizes I love this, rescue my soul from their destructions. Now, most likely, David's referring to his life physically, but I think it bears out. He also said, they rewarded me evil for good to the spoiling of my soul in verse 12. So maybe there's an application here, at least there is for us, where David is saying, restore my emotional and psychological and spiritual sanity. Don't let this trial eat me up inside. And I think when you stitch this together, that David knows he's going to be saved and delivered. He knows God has promised to preserve his life and reign and then his lineage on the throne. So he realizes that his enemies are coming in direct conflict to the brick wall of the will and the promise of God. So factually, I think objectively, he knows his life is going to be spared. Maybe right now David's saying, God, preserve my spiritual life, preserve my hope, my faith, my soul life, my internal life, my emotional and psychological stability. Don't let what they're doing eat me alive, eat me up from the inside out. My darling from the lions. And again, Hebrew poetry often repeats itself, and that's kind of what the thoughts do there. Verse 18, I will give thee thanks. Again, it's a deliberative claiming of a promise. It's a deliberative, foreshadowing. It's the preemptive. It's David saying, I know that this is going to happen, okay? And therefore, I resolve my response. So, God, I know your promise, and so I'm pre-calibrating my response to your promise in the middle of this trial. That's what's so powerful about this. He is predetermining in his trial his response as he comes out of this trial. What is that response? I will give thee thanks in the great congregation. He's not striking a deal with God. Don't read this way. God, if you rescue me, I'll live for you. That's what we try to do in a modern 21st century Christianity. God, if you get me out of this, I'll go to church. I'll be faithful. I'll serve you with the rest of my life. God, if you get me out of this, I'll do whatever you ask me to do. God, if you give me $1 million, I'll give you half of it. I mean, all these deals that they must just cause God to laugh. Number one, it's not who he is. It's not how he thinks. It's not how he works. But number two, he gave us the life of his son. He's already giving us like all of his love, all of his grace, all of his infinite goodness. And then we try to strike these silly deals. That's not what David is doing, okay? David is saying, God, because I know preemptively by faith, I know who you are. And I know you're only waiting to engage in this so long as it takes to be glorified in the story. God, I'm gonna preemptively decide I'm gonna give you thanks in the great congregation, and I will praise you among the people. So I'm gonna live that way now, knowing that's where I'm going. Think about that, my friends. I'm gonna live that way now, knowing that that's where this is all leading by faith. That's where you're taking me, God. So I trust. In the middle of this uncertainty, in the middle of this waiting, in the middle of this terrible injustice, I know where it's going. And so right now, I'm going to praise you and thank you privately. One day I'm going to do it publicly. So God, get me through. Happy Wednesday, friends. That's enough for today. We'll see you tomorrow.